the executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Okay, we have 12 appropriations bills that have to be raced through to be voted on before the August recess. I'm guessing a lot of people aren't going to be reading this before they vote on it.
No.
These bills.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe assumption. People never read the appropriations bills, not even the people that vote on them. But this is really, really important stuff because what the House Republicans are trying to do is set a marker here. We're not going to get these bills to the president's desk, but I think there is a chance to get them to the Senate, at least pass them to the House of Representatives and show that we're actually going to do something crazy, which is stick to the budget caps that they just passed last year and already are trying to bust. So we have to set the bar very, very low for Congress. But in this case, if they can just stick to their promise of last year, I think it would be a small but important victory for taxpayers.
Why isn't the speaker pulling this, for lack of a better way of describing it, all the way as far as he can to the right, and then sending it over to the Democrat Senate? They'll pull it all the way to the left, and then they'll meet somewhere toward the middle. It seems like Republicans are going, well, we know we can't get our version passed, so we're not even going to try. We're just going to create something palatable for the Senate and the president. Well, why don't you force them to the table to negotiate? You have the original power of the purse under Article 1.
Well, I would like to see these bills move a little bit further to the right, but the problem is you have to keep every single Republican happy here, and that's extraordinarily difficult to do. There's simply no margin for error. So we see even bills that should be no-brainers, we see as becoming trickier and trickier. Right now, the Defense Department appropriations bill is very, very difficult because you have some people trying to cut spending there, some people trying to add to spending, and I'm talking just about Republicans. Then you get into some of the other more controversial programs. It's a little easier to cut, for instance, the IRS, a little easier to cut the Federal Trade Commission, which has been completely off the rails. So hopefully those bills will get across the finish line, but it is a really, really difficult process to thread that needle and get all the Republicans on the same page.
Well, it's funny. Traditionally, Democrats want to cut defense spending, but when they say defense spending, they mean weapons for Ukraine and even Israel. So now if the Democrats are going to say, oh, no, we want to increase defense spending. So you mean when it's time to give away weapons to foreign nations, you'll foot the bill. But when it comes to our own defense spending, you always want to cut it in favor of things like education spending.
Yeah, and defense spending is quite a large umbrella, as you allude to. It can tap into some of the foreign policy pursuits that some members of Congress have prioritized. But it's also, a lot of these bills, unfortunately, are written by special interests in Washington, by the defense complex, industrial defense complex, that are just trying to crank out as much in the way of weaponry as they possibly can, even when the folks at the Pentagon are saying, we don't need this particular ship. We're all set there. We don't need more tanks. We don't need this particular jet because it is not sound and safe for our pilots to operate. So you see this push for unnecessary defense spending that is not actually helping us. It's just helping certain special interest groups and creating jobs in the backyards of influential members of Congress.
Look, I would love to see Mike Johnson. And, it was funny that Donald Trump talked openly about congressional rescissions, which is that unspent monies are clawed back by the Congress and then reallocated, so it's not new spending technically. We don't even know what's unspent from COVID, even, a couple of years after the end of it. I mean, we just handed out trillions of dollars. And I guess they would say, well, now that's in the hands of local school districts or, county departments or whatever it is. If I were on, the House Ways and Means Committee, I might be saying, or the subcommittee on taxation, I might be saying, hey, let's try to claw back some of this money so we don't have a $2 trillion deficit. Let's get back all this unspent money because obviously COVID is over. Let's put it back in the till.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no such thing as low-hanging fruit in Washington, but this ought to be low-hanging fruit. You're talking about literally hundreds of billions of dollars that went out the door. If you have not figured out a way, if you're a municipality and you've not figured out how you intend to spend that money, too bad, tough luck. You missed your opportunity. That money needs to come back to the Treasury immediately and be used to pay down the national debt because we can't afford this $34 trillion and growing national debt. The employee retention tax credit was abused and continues to be abused by all sorts of folks. It's going to create a even bigger nightmare than we can envision, not just the costs associated with it, but also the audits in order to try to claw some of that money back that was claimed illegally and erroneously. We need to shut down that program immediately. There's bills to do so. We just can't get them to the president's desk. And if we can, we can't get them signed. So, yeah, there's no such thing as low-hanging fruit. There are billions, hundreds of billions of dollars out there in COVID dollars and COVID tax programs that need to be shut off immediately. We just need a Congress that has the will to do that.
That might be something, Democrats would look entirely reasonable if they said, look, this is over. We're not buying bulk masks for every school district in America anymore. We don't need to make sure that every bureaucrat got a new couch and an office refrigerator. If there's money that's unspent, that's federal money, it should come back to the federal government for federal purposes. That's not a radical thing to say at all.
No, it's an absolute no-brainer. But unfortunately, there's some folks that don't have brains and don't see the light there. And a lot of the problem is, this is a year that ends in an even number, which means it's an election year. And some of those folks that are sitting on that cash that have designs to spend it for all sorts of stupid purposes are buddies with the members of Congress. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. They don't want to give this money back. They would rather use it to, build public parks and pickleball courts and whatever, all sorts of nonsensical projects that they have dreamed up. And until that changes, it's really tough to get at that money, bring it back to Washington, and do the right thing.
Well, of course, we all agree that the federal government should build pickleball courts from coast to coast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.